Well, hey folks, let's explore the final moment when Dr. James Craig, that Colorado dentist who's on trial for murdering his wife, allegedly poisoned his wife. And also review the organized and disorganized behaviors at the crime scene. Angela Craig died with a lethal amount of arsenic, cyanide, and tetrahydrozoline in her system. This case has it all. It's a calculated plan, an extramarital affair, financial troubles, and death by poison. And prosecutors are alleging that James Craig orchestrated the whole thing to escape a troubled marriage and financial woes, all while the defense is going to argue that the evidence is speculative at best, and Angela's death may have been a suicide. Well, welcome to Profiling Evil, and thanks so much for tuning in. Please take a moment, hit the like and subscribe button as we jump into this crazy case of murder. Now, James Craig, a seemingly successful dentist, is accused of orchestrating a sophisticated plot to kill his wife, all to escape a strained marriage, to pursue an affair with a Texas orthodontist, and to alleviate financial pressures, possibly tied to some life insurance, and that is yet to come. Now, prosecutors are alleging that Craig laced Angela's protein shakes with arsenic and cyanide over several weeks of time, leading to her repeated hospitalizations, at least 3 of them that I'm aware of, for dizziness, vomiting, and seizures. And when these attempts failed, they're claiming that he took a brazen step, administering a lethal dose of cyanide while Angela was lying in a hospital bed. A move that raises chilling questions about his desperation and audacity. Now, I spoke with Paul Morrow on Fox Nation about the case this week, joined by my friend Joshua Ritter, a former prosecutor and podcast host. Now, during our interview, Paul asked me directly if I'd ever handled a case where the killer slipped into a hospital room to administer a final and lethal dose of poison to the victim. I want to share my responses with you in just a minute, but I first thought it would be helpful to lay a little bit of groundwork, leaning on the investigative principle of organized versus disorganized crime scenes. I think this review will help shed some light on Craig's mindset and mistakes, again, assuming that he's innocent, but if he is truly the killer. Now, in criminal investigations, we often classify offenders as either organized or disorganized, based on their planning and execution of the crime. Organized criminals, like what we're seeing in the James Craig prosecution, are methodical. They plan out their crimes carefully, obviously the victim selected deliberately, and they take steps to avoid detection. Things like using untraceable poisons or creating alibis. These offenders often appear confident, manipulative, and narcissistic, believing that they can somehow outsmart law enforcement and outsmart the sciences of forensics and physical evidence. Now, Craig showed organizational skills in these alleged criminal actions. These are all being framed through the lens of an investigative analysis by a number of characteristics that start with what appears to be methodical and premeditated planning and research. If true, Craig allegedly researched and acquired multiple poisons: arsenic, cyanide, tetrahydrozoline. That's the stuff found in the Visine eye drops. And all this indicates deliberate forethought. Reports are suggesting that he used a secret email account in order to get these substances. This was a calculated move to avoid detection by using an untraceable or at least a less conspicuous method. Now, as a doctor of dentistry, he would clearly have a knowledge of lethal substances, And his choice of poisons, if in fact it's all true, reflect a level of sophistication, as he reportedly understood their lethal potential. For example, he allegedly purchased as many as 19 bottles of Visine, knowing that tetrahydrozoline could be fatal, even in small doses. And all this demonstrates research into how to achieve his goal. Tetrahydrozoline is less commonly recognized as a poison, but this thing can be deadly when it's ingested in significant quantities. And the excessive quantity suggests that he was either compensating for uncertainty about maybe the lethal dose, or he planned multiple attempts, indicating a calculated approach to achieving a final and fatal outcome. Now, cyanide is a highly toxic substance known for causing rapid death. It leads to symptoms like seizures, respiratory failure, and cardiac arrest. Now, Craig's alleged use of cyanide suggests that he was aware of its potency and its fast-acting nature, likely chosen to ensure a lethal outcome after earlier attempts with arsenic were failing. Now, his acquisition of cyanide indicates deliberate research into a poison that's capable of killing someone quickly, especially in a controlled setting like a hospital, where he's accused of administering it. And this reflects a sophisticated understanding of toxicology consistent with an organized offender adapting to prior failures. Now, the prosecution alleges Craig administered cyanide to Angela during her hospitalization in March of 23, when earlier poisoning attempts had failed to kill her. Now, this choice reflects an escalation in the strategy, selecting a poison known for its rapid and near certain lethality to finish the job, so to speak. But in a hospital setting, where medical intervention might otherwise save her. So his alleged ability to smuggle and administer cyanide in a controlled environment like a hospital room points to a high degree of planning and confidence in his ability to evade immediate detection. And so we're going to talk about the offender that has organized going to disorganized right after this message about CrimeCon. Hey folks, it's Mike from Profiling Evil, and I wanted to take a moment to invite you to join me at CrimeCon Denver. It's in September, and you won't want to miss this. If you love true crime and you love hanging out with people that like true crime, you ought to come and enjoy the 6,000 plus people that come to CrimeCon and take part in this amazing event. And to make it a little easier, I've worked out a deal with CrimeCon to give you a special discount on your registration. So when you go to registration, make sure you enter the code word KING, K-I-N-G, my last name, and that'll get you a discount on CrimeCon. And I look forward to seeing you there. Hey, by the way, bring your books, and I'll make sure to sign them while we're there, and we'll get some pictures together. Hey, we'll see you soon at CrimeCon. Well, as an organized offender, Craig allegedly targeted his wife Angela due to these personal motives, the extramarital affairs, the financial pressures, potentially life insurance. This indicates a deliberate choice of victim based on a desire to eliminate a problem in his life and solve another one. A hallmark of organized crime is where victims are not randomly selected, but they're selected for specific reasons. When earlier methods failed, it could be argued that Craig allegedly escalated to other chemicals, showing adaptability in his plan. This calculated adjustment also reflects an organized offender's ability to refine their method when initial attempts are failing. But it also points to the level of desperation we're starting to see when earlier attempts keep falling short. Now, as those earlier plans and fantasies failed, the organized nature of this crime began to disintegrate into a disorganized crime plan. Disorganized criminals act impulsively. They leave chaotic crime scenes and they make sloppy mistakes. Think about those incriminating emails or careless purchases. Now, many offenders start out in an organized manner, but they become disorganized when their plans are falling apart, when the fantasy is not being realized. And this leads to errors that unravel their scheme. Now, in the Craig case, it could be argued that he began with a calculated plan, only to spiral into disarray as the poisons failed to work. Now, this brings us to a fascinating question that was posed by Fox Nation anchor Paul Morrow, who asked me if I've ever investigated a case where a husband snuck into a hospital room to finish a murder with a final dose of poison. My response reveals why Craig's shift from organized to disorganized might end up being his actual downfall. Paul, I haven't had a case where the final act was in a hospital room. The thing I find so interesting in this particular case is as you look at what was happening from beginning to end, and I guess that's the real key when we're looking at them from an investigative standpoint, is what were those precipitating things that led up to the decision and the fantasy to chase the idea that I can commit homicide and get away with it. And to kind of support what Josh was saying, this idea that you're narcissistic enough that you think, not only am I going to get rid of my problem, but people are going to feel sorry for me because I've lost my companion. And then it's going to also solve some backstory problems if there's life insurance money available or other kinds of things. But as we're seeing this thing come together, the thing that I think is so interesting and so important to take into account here, and I think the thing that will be his ultimate downfall in this trial, is that he starts out pretty darn organized, and he thinks, and I think this is a guy who has manipulated most of his life, and he thinks that he can manipulate now a jury. But he goes into this crime, if in fact he's found guilty of it, he goes into it with a really organized plan. He comes up with this idea that he's going to be able to use arsenic and end his wife's life. But it doesn't work. And that's the thing about fantasy, is reality always cuts fantasy short. So the predator has to go back and fix the fantasy. Well, if arsenic isn't enough to do this thing, then maybe I need to bring in the cyanide and then bring in tetrahydrozoline. And not just buy a couple of bottles of Visine, but I read one report where he may have purchased as many as 19 bottles of Visine over 2 purchases. There are cases of children and adults who have died just mistakenly drinking a bottle of Visine. So this is a massive amount, but we see him starting to build upon failures that were made in the early stages of this crime. So we see him going from organized to disorganized. And once you start becoming disorganized, you start making a whole bunch of mistakes, whether it's in creating goofy emails or sending stuff to the wrong place or telling people I'm just not happy, and then all of a sudden something like this happens. So as you're theorizing on what we're learning here, picture this: a bustling hospital, doctors, nurses moving swiftly through the halls, and among them, James Craig, dressed in scrubs, blending seamlessly in with the medical staff. That's what prosecutors are alleging happened in March of 2023, with Angela clinging to life after weeks of poisoning. Craig, they say, saw his carefully laid plan slipping away, and the urgency was palpable. His earlier attempts with arsenic and tetrahydrozoline hadn't worked, and time was running out. So he allegedly took a drastic step, entering into her hospital room to administer that fatal dose of cyanide, the poison that would finally end Angela's life. But why the scrubs? Now, sometimes things like this happen just because they make good sense. Craig, this dentist, may have come straight from work, not even thinking about going home and making a change of clothes, a practical choice born in haste. But we have to also consider, was it something more sinister? Was it conceived? Was it a predatory tactic to disguise himself as a medical professional, slipping past suspicion to deliver that final blow? Not only are you following the digital footprint, whether it's on mobile devices or vehicles, but we have so much CCTV or camera that we can take advantage of now. And we know through some testimony that he came to the hospital dressed in scrubs. Now, a lot of dentists wear scrubs every day to work, so maybe that's not that far out of place, but it made it much easier for him to blend into the environment and go into the room, not just as the husband, but maybe as just one of the other medical folks working on the floor. Made access to Angela much easier, and maybe separated him as the husband doing a visit from some staff worker who happened to come in at about the time that she goes into a code blue and the end of her life. The James Craig trial is a stark reminder of how a seemingly perfect life can hide dark intentions. From his alleged use of those secret emails to ordering poison to the desperate attempts to cover his tracks from behind bars, this case is a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster of deception and betrayal, and we're just beginning week 2 of the trial. So will the jury see through what prosecutors call a heinous, complex, and calculated murder? Or will the defense's arguments about a flawed investigation, a troubled marriage, a suicidal woman create reasonable doubt? Well, I'd like to know your thoughts on those questions, and I got 2 others for you. So please, go down to the comments section below and weigh in, because the first question is, do you think James Craig's decision to wear scrubs in the hospital was a practical move in the heat of the moment or a deliberate, predatory tactic to blend in? And the second question I've got is based on his shift from being organized to disorganized, those errors, things like buying 19 bottles of Visine, do you believe his mistakes will be what ultimately convinces a jury of his guilt? And while you're in the comments section, take a moment to read and respond to other viewers' comments. But let's keep this conversation constructive and kind. Hey, thanks for sharing insights that spark thoughtful discussions. Now, this trial is far from over, so I encourage you to keep following the developments as the witnesses take the stand. The James Craig case, with its chilling shift from a meticulously organized poisoning plot to this chaotic trail of mistakes, is a perfect example of organized versus disorganized behaviors, the kinds of things we've been exploring. So if this case has you hooked on understanding the minds behind the crimes, I've got something special for you. My new book, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. It takes a deep dive into the psychology and tactics of organized and disorganized crime scenes, unpacking how predators like the alleged Craig plan put together their schemes, why they unravel, and what investigators look for in order to catch them. Through real-world cases and expert analysis, the book reveals the hidden patterns that define these kinds of offenders, whether they're blending into a hospital in scrubs or leaving sloppy clues like incriminating emails. It's a must-read for anybody who's fascinated by the investigative process and the battle between cunning and chaos. And you can grab your copy today in hardcover, paperback, or ebook and audiobook. And if you want a signed copy and you live in the United States, you can get it at profilingevil.com, and I'll ship that thing to you for free. Otherwise, if you live outside of the United States, you can get Wolves in Sheep's Clothing anywhere in the world through Amazon.com. So don't miss out on getting a copy of Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. Dive deeper into the world of true crime investigations. And please hit that like and subscribe button and make sure you're hitting the notification bell. That way you'll get all the notifications when we send out something new. And remember, you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like to get your true crime on the go, check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, go over to Profiling Evil and sign up for our digital newsletter. The BOLO stands for Be on the Lookout. And the only way you're going to get that thing is signing up at profilingevil.com. So thanks for your support. You know, you can also support us through PayPal at the link below or the QR code on the screen. And folks, we'll see you soon. at the next crime scene.